Welcome back to the HRCYED challenge. This is week 6 of me trying to cross off all the spots on the HRCYED bingo board in 1 year. This week I read 3 books. So the very first of them, we're just diving right in. The very first of them is Loveology by John Mark Comer. This is a very conversational, nonfiction, Christian perspective and look into relationships. Why do we get married? Why do we relate to each other? And what was the original design in marriage and how has it changed as culture has moved on? I have read this before. This is a book I enjoyed a number of years ago, but I wanted to revisit in this season of my life. And what I will say about this book is that it is not a lecture, it's not shaming, it's not focusing on all the things you shouldn't do. It's rather an invitation into seeing what relationships can be if we look at them in a different perspective. I don't rate nonfiction books, and that may irritate some of you, and I'm sorry if it does. I liked this, and I would recommend reading it if you're interested in Christianity, if you're interested in marriage and faith, and relationships and how those can intermingle, then this is a great book to read. Some of the main questions this book asks is, if love is so natural, why are we so bad at it? And what was love meant to be before we complicated things? And our human sin nature made things a whole mess. And how do friendship and desire and commitment fit into a long-lasting relationship? And what does that look like? And it also asks if marriages can flourish in a culture that hyper focuses and prizes personal freedom while you're in a covenant married relationship. And so I think those are the main questions that this book seeks to address. And it does so in a very easy to digest way. It doesn't read like an essay, it reads like a conversation. So I put this in 2 spots. The first spot is in the alphabet challenge, and this book was on my monthly TBR. So I had it for the alphabet challenge, and so I picked L as the spot that this book will go into for Loveology. The second spot I put was actually our weekly TBR, so I knocked off 2 spots in one go. First book this week, and this is in our genre challenge. And this fills the weekly TBR, and it is in the nonfiction section. We changed genres a little bit and moved into literary fiction for Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Now, I had read The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery by this author before, and I gave it 2 stars. I did not enjoy this book. So going into Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I was a little bit hesitant because I knew so many people have loved it and I've heard so many good things about it, but I was nervous because it's something that I had not had a very good experience with the author previously. This is a literary fiction book. It is a love story, but not in the typical romantic way you would expect. It's really refreshing. It centers around deep connection and vulnerability. It's heartbreaking. It doesn't shy away from a lot of grief and trauma and tragedy and difficulty. And it's also really beautifully written. It kind of goes in between some different timelines, but it's not really hard to follow. You just kind of flow with the book. The pacing's well done, and a lot of the sentences and the writing is beautifully done as well. I rated this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I had a good time. The premise is there's this girl named Sadie and this boy named Sam, and they knew each other as kids. They met in the hospital for a variety of reasons, and they would play video games together, and they just kind of grew up for quite a while playing games and bonding through that element of play and storytelling. And then they had a falling out, and then they reconnect at the beginning of the book years later. And so it's kind of about how they have built this relationship and the highs and the lows of their friendship and their dynamic as they grow into adults. It centers on their love of games and how they decide to make a game together. So this is a very video game based book, but you don't have to like video games to read it and to enjoy it. I'm not a huge gamer myself, but I found it very compelling. I was interested in knowing more. I think some of the questions that this book raises is, what does it mean to love someone through work and conflict, and especially creative differences and chaos? And how does it look like to be a friend and also a coworker with someone? I think it also asks whether platonic relationships can carry the same emotional weight as romantic ones, and how do you balance those things, and should they? Something else it asks is, how do we or don't we heal from trauma, and how does that then influence the roles we step into and the things we allow ourselves to experience and decide to grow in and adjust as a result of. And what I like about this book is it doesn't necessarily seek to answer the questions it asks. It more just draws you into considering, which I really liked. And I think the last main question this book asks is, how does play, video game or otherwise, how does play reveal our humanity and our desire to be understood? And how do we put ourselves into a character or into play in order to be known? And should we do that? And what does that look like? So I think those are the main questions this book seeks to sit with and wonder about. And like I said, it's not really intending to answer the questions. We put this in two spots as well. The very first one we put this in was blurbed books. This is the original book. I pulled this for my TBR as well, and it has so many different people who have blurbed it, so I figured this was the perfect one to start with. This will be our original, and then we'll get 3 books that we'll read based off of the authors who have blurbed this on the cover. And the second spot we put this in was the alphabet challenge, and I decided to put this in the Z category for Zevin, author's last name. So that is tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and on to our next. The last book we read this week is a very fun, cozy fantasy. It's A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by J. Penner. This book is cozy fantasy in that the fantasy doesn't really play a role in a book. It's more of a setting. There are a little bit of influences from it, but the characters could all be really any type of fantastical creature, and it wouldn't really change the plot. It's more of an environment, but it's a phenomenal environment, and I enjoyed this so much. Basically, the premise of this book is that there is this girl, she's a human, she lives in a magical world, and she is magic-less. And so she has a lot of struggles kind of trying to move forward because of the hierarchy of magical beings. She is at basically the bottom. And so she gets entered into this baking competition by her neighbor, and she goes off to the competition, and just joy and chaos and unexpected things ensue. This is a very tropey book. It's very predictable, it's easy to read, it's fun, it's enjoyable. Am I going to remember this book? No, I'm not. But I had such an easy go of reading it that I really enjoyed it. I think this book is a YA novel. This is counted as adult fantasy. I cannot figure out why it's not YA. There is nothing spicy in this book at all. It's a very clean read. It's got a little bit of tension, but even that is very minimal. It's just cozy. It's the type of book you want to read when you're curled up on the couch and the snow is falling and you just want to get in with a book that's not going to add any chaos or intense emotions to your life. It's just pure escapism. And the food in this book sounds so good. Do not read this if you do not have a little sweet treat on hand. You will probably end up door dashing something because it just sounds so good. I rated this book a 4. I rated this because there's nothing I didn't like about it other than that it read fairly juvenile and was very tropey, but I don't mind a trope. I wasn't upset about any of it, but I couldn't rate it above a 4 because it wasn't anything that's going to stick with me. It wasn't stellar writing, it wasn't a stellar plot, but it was a good time. I think the questions that this book seeks to ask are, what makes up a family? And who determines your worth? And how does your perception of your own worth and value impact how we enter relationships with others? I think it also asks, how does social status impact our view of ourselves and our view of others? And I think that's really what this book centers on, is like, how do we inhibit ourselves based on our own self-belief, and how do we maybe put others on a pedestal or tear ourselves down based on what we believe they think about us. And I think maybe the reason this book felt a little bit juvenile, other than the writing, was that some of these questions felt very teen questions to me that the book was seeking to answer. And there may be more that I will never claim to understand every question an author is seeking to ask. But I do think that some of the questions this book was looking to ask were questions I was thinking about when I was in high school and, ending middle school, going into high school, and not really questions I've considered for myself in a while. I feel fairly solidified in how I feel about these topics specifically. And so maybe that plays into why it read more YA than adult. Obviously, the first category I put this in was book and recipe. I couldn't imagine any other book that could belong here more than this book. There are literal recipes in the back of the book, and I did make a recipe, but I don't think it counts because I just made a nice baked blueberry treat. It's a galette, but I was thinking about it and I was like, this is not specifically a recipe from this book. This is in the vibe of the book. This is something that could have been made in the competition. But I decided I'm gonna make something again. I don't think this fully counts as this category. So I have read the book, but I'm going to make a cake this weekend and have my friends over and we'll eat it. And I think that is what I need to do to officially mark out this category because it felt a little bit underwhelming and I wanted to fully commit to the heart of the challenge. I don't know that it lived up to the expectations. The second spot I put this book in is By the Hundreds. This is a shorter book. It's under 300 pages, so it goes in the 200s category. I am known for reading 300 plus page books, so finding shorter books was actually a little bit trickier for me. So when I realized this was going to fall in the 200s category, I knew immediately that this is the spot it was going to go in. And then moving on to our weekly favorites, my favorite of the 3 books I read this week was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I rated it 4.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I would consider rereading this book. And on the full chart of all of the books I have read in this challenge each week, I put this in the 3rd spot beneath Emma, but above One Golden Summer. The last thing we need to do is spin the weekly TBR. So we have our monthly TBR. I did read a number of books from it already. I feel like I'm knocking out my TBR faster than expected, but obviously every week we spin the TBR wheel and then we decide what book I need to read before I release the next video. Do I always succeed at this? No. But it's fun to have a challenge and it kind of guides what books I pick. For this challenge, I have so many books that I need to read for it, and sometimes picking which one to read next has been a little bit tricky for me. So this was a nice way to just give myself a bite-sized category of something to read that I'm excited about. So without further ado, we're going to spin the weekly TBR. Here we go. Okay, we got the Birth Year bestseller, and this is actually one of my monthly TBR books. This is very convenient. I did already pick out a book for this in last week's video, so we are reading the Poisonwood Bible for this month, and I guess we'll be reading it this week since it is on the weekly TBR, and now it is also on our monthly TBR. So I guess it is time for me to have read this book. We will be reading this week and I'll tell you about it next week. And that is all for this week's video. So we have now read 16 books. We are 6 weeks into this challenge. Keep reading, keep resting, and I will see you soon.